The Galactic Empire had stretched its rule across thousands of star systems, and for centuries it believed there were no real threats left in the galaxy. Civilizations either joined willingly or disappeared under the shadow of the Empire's power. With advanced technology, unmatched fleets, and absolute control, the Empire saw itself as the final word in galactic order. It ruled with pride and certainty, never expecting a challenge from anywhere, especially not from a small blue planet on the edge of an unimportant spiral arm. That planet was Earth. At first, Earth seemed ordinary, inhabited by a species called humans, who had only recently begun exploring space. They had basic ships, weak defenses, and a strange mixture of hope and violence in their history. The Empire's scouts discovered Earth during a routine sweep through unexplored systems. There was no reason to worry. The humans had no powerful weapons, no hidden allies, and no ancient relics. They were young, curious, and isolated. Still, as always, the Empire followed protocol. They sent ambassadors, made contact, and watched carefully. The humans welcomed them with open arms. They smiled, shared culture, invited the Empire to visit their cities, and asked questions about space, stars, and alien species. The Empire was amused. To them, it felt like teaching children. But something felt strange. During meetings, the humans never seemed afraid. They were polite, yes, but also calm. Too calm. When the Empire's delegates warned them gently that they were now under the Empire's protection, the humans didn't react with fear or submission. They only nodded and said, "We understand. But we don't want protection. We want peace. And we prefer to stand on our own." The Empire wasn't used to hearing that. Most species either obeyed or begged for mercy. These humans did neither. Curious, the Empire's analysts began to study human history. What they found unsettled them. Humans had fought more wars against themselves than any species ever recorded. Their past was full of conflict, civil wars, world wars, revolutions, invasions, and yet they survived everything. Not just survived, they evolved. With every disaster, every bloodshed, they grew stronger, smarter, more united. Where other species fell apart under stress, humans adapted. Empires rose and fell, but humanity always rose again. The Empire's advisors warned that this was a dangerous trait, but the High Council dismissed it. They believed that humans were now peaceful, civilized, and no longer a threat. After all, Earth had no war fleets. No superweapons. Just stories. And so the Empire continued its usual path. It offered humans a place in the galactic system under its flag. It promised order, trade, and progress. But the humans refused to join fully. They traded and talked, but remained independent. They were friendly, but distant. Their leaders, especially, kept repeating one quiet phrase: "Do not mistake our peace for weakness." The Empire began to grow impatient. Earth had valuable resources. Its people were inventive, quick to learn, and unpredictable. The Empire believed it was time to take action. Not war, not yet, but a small message. So they targeted a human colony in the Kepler sector, a peaceful settlement of farmers, scientists, and children. The Empire declared it under their direct control, removed the human governor, and replaced him with one of their own. No shots were fired. No one was hurt. But the message was clear: the Empire was in charge now. Then came Earth's reply. A single transmission, unencrypted and simple. One word: run. At first, the Empire laughed. It was the reaction they expected, just not the tone. Run, not surrender. No pleas. No threats. Just a warning. The fleet commander dismissed it as a bluff. The Empire had crushed larger enemies for less. But then the sensors picked up movement ships appearing out of nowhere, massive but silent, cold and gray with no markings. Human ships, but unlike any in the Empire's database, they didn't look designed for beauty or politics. They were machines of survival, brutal and direct. The Empire sent fighters to scan them. They were destroyed before completing their first pass. Still, the fleet commander ordered a strike, confident in the Empire's strength. It was the worst mistake of his life. In less than 5 minutes, the Empire's front line vanished. Human ships moved like predators, disabling weapons, engines, and communications in a single pass. They didn't waste energy. They didn't ask questions. They struck with the precision of a species that had learned how to fight by fighting itself for centuries. Panic swept through the Empire's command center. This wasn't a war. It was a demonstration, a lesson, one that the Empire had never experienced before. In the ruins of the outpost, a single message was broadcast again. We warned you. Run. And finally, for the first time in the history of the great Galactic Empire, someone did. The Galactic Empire had always believed that fear was stronger than resistance, and for centuries they had ruled with this belief unchallenged. No species had ever dared to ignore their warnings, much less strike back. But after the humans destroyed their fleet near the Kepler colony and sent the chilling message, "We warned you. Run," the Empire was shaken. Still, they could not accept the idea that a young species from a small planet could pose a real threat. They believed it was a lucky ambush, a surprise attack, nothing more. The Emperor himself, sitting on his throne of light within the Imperial core, refused to believe that humans were capable of sustained warfare at their level. He ordered a full retaliation, a show of strength. A massive fleet was dispatched, consisting of dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers, each armed with enough firepower to wipe out a solar system. Their orders were simple: crush human resistance, occupy Earth, and bring their leaders to the capital in chains. As the fleet moved into position, they broadcast a warning across every known human communication channel. It was arrogant, loud, and confident, claiming that humanity would be taught a lesson and that their survival would depend on submission. But Earth didn't reply. There were no angry words, no threats, no begging, just silence. And that silence grew heavier with each passing hour. The commanders felt it, even if they didn't admit it. There was something about the way humans disappeared from sensors, the way they never responded, that made even seasoned admirals uneasy. Then the fleet entered human territory, and everything changed. Communication between ships started failing without explanation. Drones sent ahead vanished. Navigation systems glitched. Entire battle groups lost their way in the darkness of space, and some ships found themselves circling back to their own starting points without realizing it. It was as if space itself had turned against them. Panic began to spread quietly. When they reached the outermost human station, expecting a defensive line, they found nothing. The station was empty, abandoned, dark, lifeless. But as they scanned it, a signal was triggered, and the station exploded with such precision that it damaged 6 nearby ships before anyone could react. That was the first real blow. The second came hours later, when half the fleet suddenly lost power. Human code had somehow entered their systems, shutting down weapons and engines without firing a single shot. And then the attacks began, not from the front, not from the expected routes, but from every shadow. Human ships appeared like ghosts, striking with speed and efficiency. They didn't waste time with long battles. They disabled systems, boarded flagships, and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. Some alien commanders tried to regroup, but their calls were answered by static, or worse, by intercepted human transmissions whispering the same terrible phrase, "We warned you." The attacks were not random. They were surgical, intelligent, and terrifying. Human pilots used strange tactics, moving their ships through asteroid fields and gas clouds with a level of control that made Empire targeting systems useless. They used sound against them, broadcasting frequencies that drove some alien species mad. They hacked into visual feeds and displayed footage of ancient human wars, of fire and destruction, of cities bombed to ashes, not to boast but to remind their enemies that this was how humans had learned to survive. Not through peace, but through pain. The Empire had misunderstood everything. They thought humans avoided war because they were weak. But in truth, humans avoided war because they knew exactly what it meant. They had burned their own world in the past. They had rebuilt from ashes. And now they had the skills, the mindset, and the heart of a species that had fought itself to become stronger. That was something the Empire had never faced before. Most galactic civilizations had evolved through cooperation and peace. Humanity evolved through chaos. And when they turned their focus on an external enemy, that enemy stood no chance. The surviving Empire commanders begged for reinforcements, but the main communication relays had already been cut. The human fleets, though fewer in number, moved like predators that had been waiting for this moment for generations. They didn't show mercy, but they didn't show hate either. They were calm, focused, and unstoppable. By the time the Empire realized their mistake, it was too late. Half their fleet was gone. The other half was running. Some ships fled into unexplored space, hoping to escape what they now called the Hunters. The Galactic Council tried to control the narrative, blaming rogue human factions, denying the scale of the defeat. But the truth spread quickly. Survivors spoke of how one human soldier, alone on a captured Empire cruiser, disabled the entire ship by overloading the engines with nothing but a maintenance drone and a sharp mind. Others told stories of human medics treating wounded prisoners, not because they were kind, but because they wanted their enemies to survive long enough to carry the message. We don't want war, but we are ready for it. That was the greatest mistake the Empire had made, not the attack, not the occupation, but the assumption that humans would respond like everyone else. They didn't beg. They didn't break. They warned them. And then they acted. And now, all across the stars, new warnings echoed. Entire systems that had once served the Empire put up human flags, not out of loyalty, but out of fear and respect. Smugglers and merchants spread stories of human ships appearing without sound and disappearing with stolen data. The galaxy had changed, and the Empire, for the first time, understood the true cost of underestimating a species that had spent its entire existence fighting for survival. A species that never asked for a place in the galaxy, but would take one if forced. And in the silent wreckage of the lost fleet, one final message looped through the darkness, still broadcasting to anyone who listened, "We warned you. You should have run." After the Empire's mistake and the humiliating defeat of their powerful fleet, the galaxy stood in uneasy silence. Many thought humans would be satisfied with defending their space and teaching a lesson, but humanity had seen too much, lost too much, and learned far more than the Empire had ever expected. What the aliens failed to understand was that humans were not just protecting themselves anymore, they were responding. They had warned once, they had defended once, but now it was time for action. Across Earth and its colonies, a call was made. Not one of fear, but of unity. For the first time in recorded history, every human faction, government, and space agency came together without hesitation. They did not argue over politics or power. They all agreed on one thing: the threat must never rise again. The retaliation wasn't loud at first. It was quiet, planned, and deadly precise. The first strike came not from warships, but from silence. Empire listening posts stopped responding. Remote outposts vanished from maps. Then came the storm. Human warships, unlike anything seen before, emerged from hidden shipyards across asteroid belts and deep space zones. These weren't just machines. They were symbols of purpose, built with speed, covered in adaptive armor, and equipped with weapons the galaxy had never seen. Lasers that curved mid-space, railguns that ignored shields, and drones that could outthink enemy pilots. The fleet was led by a ship known only as the Revenant, a massive black vessel with no visible markings, rumored to house the greatest minds and warriors humanity had. Its arrival in the Gorgon sector was not announced, but the moment it appeared, entire systems went dark. The humans didn't send messages or warnings this time. They moved like a force of nature, hitting communication hubs, factories, and command stations with surgical strikes. Every target was carefully selected. They didn't attack civilians or planets, they went straight for the heart of the Empire's strength. Fleet command centers crumbled. Resource convoys vanished. Starports were destroyed without even a chance to defend themselves. The retaliation was not just physical, it was psychological. The humans released classified data they had stolen from the Empire's own archives. They exposed secrets, revealed corruption, and broadcast evidence of war crimes across neutral systems. Species that had once obeyed the Empire in silence began to whisper and rebel. Some began helping the humans in small ways, feeding them intelligence, sabotaging supplies, opening backdoors in security systems. Humanity had become more than a force, they had become an idea, and ideas were far more dangerous than weapons. In one shocking mission, a human infiltration team breached the Empire's outer capital defense without firing a shot. They used cloaked suits and AI-guided mapping to walk straight into a command station and disable the shield grid. That station was later destroyed in a single blast from a railgun orbiting a nearby moon. The Empire's generals couldn't understand how humans were moving so fast, how they knew every weakness. They didn't know that humans had studied them long before the first shot was ever fired. Humanity had been listening, watching, preparing for decades. The Empire had underestimated their patience, not just their strength. Now, it was too late. The retaliation wasn't driven by revenge, it was about balance. About making sure this never happened again. And so, humans didn't waste time with speeches. They acted. And when one Empire admiral tried to negotiate peace by threatening another fleet, his ship was surrounded by human vessels that appeared without warning, and his last words were, "They're already here." Even the stars seemed to betray the Empire. Their navigational systems failed more often now. Their maps no longer matched reality. That's because humans had launched nanosatellites that moved through systems, altering data, changing gravitational signals, and feeding false paths into enemy ships. Some cruisers ended up lost in dead space, never heard from again. The retaliation was a storm that didn't scream, it whispered. One by one, the lights of the Empire's strength began to flicker and die. But humanity wasn't just attacking, they were transforming. Every battle gave them more experience. Every captured ship gave them new technology. They were adapting, learning, and moving faster than any species in known history. While the Empire struggled to respond, humans were already upgrading weapons and training soldiers who could fight in 3 dimensions, in silence, in total darkness. The galaxy began to shift. Neutral species, once afraid to choose sides, now welcomed human envoys. They had seen the difference. Humans didn't conquer. They protected those who stayed out of the fight. But those who supported the Empire? They were not shown mercy. There was no second warning. And so, planets that once proudly flew the Empire's banners now burned them to avoid being targeted. Fear turned to respect. Respect turned to awe. And still, humanity didn't stop. Not because they loved war, but because they couldn't afford to trust silence anymore. The Empire had shown its true face, and humans were making sure it could never wear that mask again. In the void between stars, where battles raged without sound, stories began to spread of a single human ship taking down entire fleets, of soldiers who moved like ghosts, of leaders who spoke not with pride, but with resolve. One Empire survivor, found drifting in a damaged pod, said only one sentence before falling unconscious. "They fight like they've already died once." And maybe that was true. Maybe humanity had died long ago on battlefields of Earth, in civil wars, in global disasters, and what remained was a species that understood loss so deeply that fear no longer controlled them. That was what made them unstoppable. They didn't want war, but once forced into it, they would finish it completely. The retaliation was not a cry for blood. It was a reminder to the galaxy, never again. The last act of retaliation came in silence. A signal was sent from Earth, broadcasting to every Empire capital and colony. A simple message: let this be the last war. We will not warn you again. And with that, the human fleet vanished into deep space, leaving behind only wreckage and the memory of what happens when humanity is underestimated. As the human fleet disappeared into deep space, leaving behind a trail of silence and destruction, something far more dangerous began to spread. Through the heart of the Galactic Empire, fear. Not the loud, chaotic kind, but the slow, creeping fear that sank into bones and whispered doubts into every corner of the once unshakable power. For centuries, the Empire had ruled through force and control, crushing rebellions and silencing unrest with swift brutality. But this was different. The humans didn't fight by rules the Empire understood. They didn't conquer worlds or raise flags. They struck only where it mattered, then vanished like ghosts, leaving no chance to recover. And this, more than any weapon, broke the spirit of those who served the Empire. On distant outposts, soldiers who once laughed at the idea of humans now stared into the black void, jumping at shadows, unsure if they would see another sunrise. Commanders whispered about human infiltration squads, cloaked in advanced tech, able to walk through walls and steal data without detection. Some reports claimed entire stations had been emptied overnight. No bodies, no noise, just empty halls and blinking alarms. Soon, lower officers began requesting transfers, faking injuries, or simply deserting. Even high-ranking admirals grew quiet in meetings, choosing their words carefully, watching who was listening. Trust began to crack. Accusations of spies and traitors became common. The fear of the humans turned inward, and slowly, hoping to form their own breakaway states before the Empire completely collapsed. This disloyalty spread like a virus. In the Grand Palace on Tyronex, the Empire's capital planet, the High Chancellor held emergency meetings behind closed doors, surrounded by triple security layers while riots broke out in the outer cities. Citizens, once proud of their empire, began asking dangerous questions. Why are the humans stronger? Why did we start this war? Why are our leaders hiding while planets burn? Rumors fed the fire stories of entire fleets destroyed by a single human warship, or of alien species secretly helping the humans in exchange for protection. Whether true or not, these tales spread faster than orders could stop them. News channels were shut down, communications filtered, but the fear kept growing, fed by silence. And in that silence, brave voices began to rise. On the planet Felrix, a low-level technician leaked footage of a human strike team walking calmly through a supposedly secure facility, disabling defenses without killing a single soul. That video, passed from device to device, sparked protests, then a full-scale rebellion. Felrix's governor fled in disguise, while the citizens declared themselves free, vowing to never again serve the Empire. That event triggered others. Planets that had quietly obeyed for generations now began cutting ties. Trade routes were blocked. Local leaders refused to follow orders. One colony even renamed their city New Terra and raised the human symbol as a warning. In response, the Empire sent elite shock troopers to crush the movement, but they never arrived. The troopship was found floating in space, systems fried, the crew unconscious but unharmed, with a single human message etched onto the hull: "You were warned." The psychological war was complete. Generals no longer feared just defeat, they feared being watched, being outmaneuvered, being exposed. Every movement felt monitored, every command second-guessed. It became common for soldiers to abandon posts, convinced the humans were coming. Some fired at shadows. Others took their own lives. Paranoia bloomed like poison. Inside the Empire's Intelligence Bureau, the once feared agency tasked with control and order, agents began turning on each other. Files were destroyed. Evidence of mistakes was buried. The agency's own director vanished one night, and no one dared to ask why. Some whispered he had defected. Others believed he was taken by the humans. Whatever the truth, his disappearance sent shockwaves through the command structure. And amid all this, the humans remained mostly silent. Their ships didn't appear often. Their soldiers weren't seen. But their presence was felt everywhere. As if they had become a living myth, a force the galaxy could no longer deny or control. In secret meetings, the remaining Empire rulers argued about surrender, about retreating to a smaller territory, about saving face, but no one could agree. Pride held some of them back. Fear froze the rest. And so, the Empire stood still, collapsing without a single human firing a shot. Meanwhile, in hidden corners of the galaxy, new alliances formed. Former slaves, once forced to work under the Empire, began organizing under human guidance. Engineers started rebuilding old worlds, scientists shared technology, and children learned about humanity, not as a monster, but as a miracle, brutal in war, but fair in peace. The Empire's citizens, seeing this, began to question everything. If humans could fight like demons yet show mercy, What did that say about their own leaders, who ruled through fear and lies? And so the final fracture began not through battles, but through belief. Faith in the empire vanished, and when faith dies, so does power. One by one, star systems declared independence. Some did so quietly, others with fire. The empire tried to respond but had no strength left. Its fleets were scattered, its commanders unsure, its citizens unwilling. Even the High Chancellor, once untouchable, now faced whispers of arrest. In the final days, as silence returned to the Empire's throne world, the only message anyone received from Earth was simple: let peace rise or let fear consume you. We have made our choice. And with that, the humans vanished once again, not as conquerors, but as a force that left the galaxy forever changed. The Empire, broken from within, had no more enemies left to fight, only its own reflection in the shattered mirror of history. The galaxy had gone quiet, not the peace of victory, but the stillness that comes after a storm has torn through everything, leaving only questions behind. The Galactic Empire was no longer what it had been. The mighty war fleets were scattered or destroyed, their admirals missing, their commanders in hiding. Fear had eaten its way into every corner of the Empire, and in that silence, frequencies. The message did not boast or threaten. It did not promise more destruction. Instead, it was a warning not just to the Empire, but to every species that had watched the war unfold. We never wanted war, it began, but when you brought it to our door, we showed you what humanity truly is. Now learn from this moment, or fall like the ones before you. The words echoed across planets still burning from the fight, across stations abandoned in fear, across the hearts of those who thought they understood power. What followed was not conquest. Earth did not send a fleet to take control. No human claimed the throne of the fallen empire. Instead, humans helped others rebuild on neutral planets. They offered technology and protection, and with every act of mercy, the galaxy saw something it had never expected. Humans were not just warriors, they were builders, thinkers, and leaders. Soon, species once divided by fear or hatred began working together under human guidance, not by force, but by choice. The old way of power through control was crumbling, and a new idea was spreading an order built not on domination, but on balance, with justice and defense for all. In this new order, humans refused to be kings, but no one dared to challenge their decisions. Their voice was final, not because of fear, but because of the respect they had earned in war and peace. Councils were formed, each world sending leaders to speak and vote, but every meeting began with the same reminder: let us not forget what woke us. Let us never again make humanity remind us. This phrase was carved into walls of the new Galactic Assembly, a monument of both warning and hope. But not everyone accepted the change. Some remnants of the old empire still plotted in the dark, believing they could rise again. They called the humans manipulators, pretending to help while setting rules. One such faction, hidden on the edge of the Nabari system, began building a secret fleet, hoping to strike before the new order fully formed. But before their ships even launched, a single human vessel appeared above their base. It did not fire. It only sent one file video footage of the faction's hidden plans, communications, and weapons caches. Then it left without a word. The leaders of the plot surrendered themselves within hours, not because of force, but because they understood what this meant: the humans were watching. And that became the greatest fear across the stars, not their weapons, but their knowledge. Humans knew things no one else did. They appeared where they weren't expected, stopped problems before they spread, and gave solutions before others even saw the problem. Many wondered how this was possible. Some believed humans had spies in every system. Others claimed their A's could predict the future. But no one truly knew, and that was what made the humans untouchable. Over time, the galaxy changed. The children of former enemy races were now learning in schools built with human cooperation. Trade routes, once guarded by warships, were now protected by peacekeeping alliances. Pirates vanished. Slave markets were shut down. Corruption was punished quickly. Peace, which once seemed impossible, was no longer a dream, it was reality. And in this peace, people whispered the name of Earth, not with hatred, but with respect. Yet Earth itself remained quiet. The humans didn't rule from a throne or build an empire. They stayed in the shadows, guiding when needed, stepping forward only when chaos threatened. Their silence became their power. Their actions spoke louder than words. And through it all, they never forgot why they fought. A monument on Mars carried the names of every human lost in the first strike by the Empire, and every visitor, alien or human, who stood before it understood what it meant. It was not a monument of hate, but of memory, of a warning that peace must be protected and that there are limits that should never be crossed again. The new galactic order, born from ashes, was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still mistakes, but now there was something stronger than fear holding it together: understanding. The memory of what humanity did in retaliation was enough to keep greed and pride in check. No one wished to test if the humans still had the fire they once unleashed. Some say that deep in the galaxy, hidden from all maps, there exists a place called the Silence Station, where the most powerful human minds meet, not to plan wars, but to prepare for the next great threat. No one has ever seen it. No one dares to search for it. And perhaps that is how it should be. Because in the end, humanity never asked to lead. They only asked to be left alone. But when challenged, they showed the truth of their nature: not monsters, not conquerors, but a force of will and survival that could not be broken. And so, the galaxy moved forward under their shadow, guided by their warning, and forever changed by the war they never wanted but never